Welcome to Sybil After Six. I am so excited to have the amazing Crystal Petrie today. She has the Crystal Petrie podcast. She's a consultant, but we are going to dive right on in. Crystal, how are you doing this evening?
I am doing so good, Sybil. Thank you so much for having me on your platform and making space for me to come and speak to your audience.
Thank you. Listen, you sent me this very lovely bio. I don't want to butcher it, but what I am going to say is you have a background in media, communications, and broadcasting. You have a master's degree as well, and now you have pivoted into grant writing. So,
Yes.
as someone who has, I think I'm on career like 4 or 5, right? Judge me not. Um, why did you make that pivot? Like, because I think so often we think, oh my gosh, this is a really big pivot. Y'all, I went from HR to being a speaker, media person,
Wow.
right? Like, so what was your pivot? Why did you decide to go from communications over to grant writing?
Okay, so as you stated before, I have a background in media and I worked in news media. Did that for several years, then went on to a nonprofit governmental agency. And everything under that agency comes from grant funding. So your salary, your fringe benefits like paid vacation, paid sick, paid time off, even paying the light, water, and gas for the building, mileage, if you had to use your personal vehicle to go somewhere, all of that, everything was paid under grants. And before I started working at this entity, I honestly cannot remember a civil, but I don't think I had even heard the word grant or funding or anything like that.
Right.
Maybe I did in passing, but not just on an everyday basis. So I started working for this entity, and I'm working there several years, getting an understanding of grants and how they work and how they operate. And I just realized how powerful grants are.
Yeah.
Grants have the power to completely turn your life around in a positive way.
Yeah.
Grants have the power to create a entirely new business or grow a business that you may already have, whether that's nonprofit or for-profit business or entrepreneurs or solopreneurs. Grant funding is so powerful. And I
Yeah.
realized that while I was working for this entity. So when I felt like it was time for me to leave, and again, this was another, God speaking to me moment telling me it is time for you to move on.
Yeah.
So when I did that, I knew that grants had to be center stage in my consulting business, the Crystal Petrie. It's Crystal Petrie Consulting. So I knew that grants needed to be center stage in that because it's so powerful. And I was able to witness the power of grants. I
Yeah.
was able to live and be promoted and accelerated because of grants. And I also realized that a lot of people don't know about the power of grants. They
Right.
either don't know about the power of grants or they are fearful of grants.
Interesting. Why are
So,
people feel I not to cut why are people fearful of grants? That's a really big yeah, dive in that one for me.
yeah, it's a huge claim. So a lot of times people are fearful of grants and not fearful like maybe you're scared of dogs or something like that,
Right.
but fearful about the process. How do I find grants? Where do I go and look for grants? How do you know what is a legitimate funding opportunity or what's a scam?
Mm,
If I get this money, what do I do with it? How do I know how to spend it? How do I know like what information to put into these grants, what information not to put into these grants? So it's a lot of that involved in, the fear. It's more so, I would say, the fear of the unknown.
got you.
Mhm.
Got you. Is that why you started doing your virtual grant writing sessions every quarter? Was it because of that?
That's exactly, and that's such a great lead in. Oh my God. But yes, Sybil, that's exactly why. Because just like in my podcast, the foundation of the podcast is education.
Mhm.
Education is the foundation of my consulting company across all aspects of it, whether it's the podcast or the grant writing. And I have created virtual grant writing workshops
Okay.
where I will be with small groups and educate them about writing grants, researching grants, finding grants, what information to put into the grant proposal, what information to not put in there, how to get the funders' attention and keep their attention when you're writing your grant proposals. It's something that I'm very excited about.
Yeah.
And it's every quarter, just like you said. The first one is going to be August 21st. And then from there, we will have another one in November, and then February, and then May. So every quarter, people will have the opportunity to come and listen and learn about how to write grants, award-winning grants. Let me make sure I emphasize that. How to
That's
write
great.
award-winning grants. And you will be able to have live Q&A with me. If you have a grant, about 80, maybe 85% of that grant will be written by the time the workshop is over. So you can literally bring that grant and ask questions and learn and listen. And whenever the workshop is complete, your grant will just about be complete. And it's something that I'm very excited about. It continues the foundation of educating. It continues my mission and my vision to educate, to empower people through education, and for people to elevate themselves because of the education. And if I may do a shameless plug here, Sybil, if people are interested in signing up for that boot camp, that workshop, you can go to my website and sign up. Just Google Crystal Petrie Consulting and it'll pull up the website. You could go to the website and register, make your payment, and sign up and secure your spot all from there.
That is amazing. I came out the nonprofit space and I remember just how important our grants writing team was, but
Mhm.
not just our grant writing team, but our grant financial manager. Because, like you said, it's not just the unknown of I got the grant, but when I actually win this grant, am I meeting the requirements? Am I going to get dinged if I don't file appropriately, especially if it's
Yeah.
federal funding versus private funding and that sort of thing? And so the fact that you're willing to demystify that entire process for
Yeah.
smaller businesses, I think is just an amazing service that you have. So no, that's not a cheap plug. That's you serving in your strengths
Thank you. Thank
and
you.
supplying somebody who needs this with the information that they will have. And I think that is amazing that by the end of the experience, the grant will be 85% there. So I think that's absolutely fabulous. One other thing, though, that you talked about is something that I think a lot of my audiences are experiencing, which is that pivot out of one industry into another. And what I like to harp on is what were you doing at your core anyway? I think we get so tied into the titles that we forget, like, this is the core of me. And what I'm hearing you say is the core of you as an educator.
Yes. Yes. I have realized, I mean, at this big age in my life, Sybil, I understand the importance of education,
Yeah.
but growing up, becoming a teenager, young lady, I did not have the education that I needed to make sound decisions, to make good decisions. Now, I realize that even with the proper education and proper information, that some people, because we are dealing with humans here, will still not make the right decisions for their life or for their business. But I hold on to the thought that because this is a lived experience for me, that if someone is given the correct information, the proper education, that they will start making better decisions for themselves in life and in business. And once you make one good decision, it's easier to make the next good decision, the next good decision. And that thought, because again, it is a lived experience, that thought for me is what drives me with my podcast and selecting the guest. It's what drives me with the grant writing services that I provide, and what drives me with the virtual grant writing workshops that I provide as well. That thought, thinking that if I been of service, if I can equip people with the right information, the right education, then they will start making better decisions in their life. Because for me, I wasn't equipped with education. Like, I just grew up civil because that's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
But I wasn't given education. I wasn't given tools.
Yeah.
Like, I could clearly see what not to do,
Mhm.
but I didn't know what to do. But once I started receiving and getting education, the proper education, then I started making better decisions in my life and in my business. And it's led to where I am now.
That's amazing. That is amazing. Um, I think the best decision that I could have made for my business was literally turning it over to God and saying, okay, God, I'm the problem. Please help me work through these things, you know? Um, I don't know if that's been your experience, but in those moments when general knowledge is not working, there's a wisdom that can only come from divine downloads. And so I'm very curious as you build your business, build your podcast and serve, what had to change in you spiritually, or what in your relationship with God had to change for you to be able to serve what I call at the highest level?
Oh, that is a great question. It has I had a relationship with God, and I had a relationship with Jesus before this process of the podcast and the consulting firm and all of that. But it has, for me, created a deeper relationship with God, one that I didn't know before.
Yeah.
And so now what I do is I am reliant upon God for podcast guests. I'm reliant on God on what services I should offer, what services I should not offer. Because if I'm just being totally honest here, Sybil, when I was working for traditional jobs, I knew that, every 2 weeks I'm getting this paycheck, right? I knew that I had this time off. I knew I had this vacation, like all of these like perks and benefits that you get for working with a traditional job. But
Yeah.
now that I am out here, and I'm not going to say I'm doing it alone, because
Right.
of course God is with me every step of the way,
Yeah.
but I am really the only person working on the admin side and on the front street. I have to be so dependent upon him for everything in this business.
Yeah.
The growth of the business, the clients. It's been times where, a client has reached out to me for services, and God has been like, no,
Oh,
knowing that I need that money.
yes.
Like, simple, I need that money. I'm not
Will he do
paid
it
every
though?
2 weeks, you know?
Yes.
But just being obedient and listening to his voice and being obedient to the things that he is asking me to do, and even the things that he is asking me not to do. So I'm dependent upon him in a way that I never was before, because honestly, I never had to be,
Yeah. I
especially when you're working in a traditional job.
Oh yeah. I said entrepreneurship is the ultimate surrender. Like when you say I surrender all, who God really meant that. Okay, God, you got it. And I think all of us who have really leaned in can attest to when God says, no, that client is not for you. And it's in those moments that he really is asking you to trust him. But on the flip side of that, the increase from not having that client is so much greater.
Yes, absolutely. That is absolutely true. And if there have been moments where I've had like my business credit card bill due, Sybil, and I'm just like, in my brain, how am I gonna pay for this? You know, and then I promise you, someone will call me and say, "Hey, Crystal, I want to buy this,"
Yes.
just out the blue. And I'm just, and it's like the exact amount that I need for the bill or more than, the amount that I need. And it's just random. It's out of the blue. It's nobody that I called or made a sales call to or sent an email to. They just call me and be like, hey, I want to do this. And like immediately pay. I don't have to like try and convince them or sell them or, so it's been so many of those moments where God has put people in my space that has allowed for the business to continue to grow financially, because that's part of it, that has allowed for the business to continue to grow financially, but also grow in other spaces and meet other people like yourself, for example, that I'm sure if I was still working for a traditional job that I would never, I don't think I would have ever met you. Now that's just me speaking in the human side.
Right.
But that's just how I feel.
That is, no, I agree. I think God has really pruned my human selection process. That's what I tell people. God really
Mhm.
has helped me to prune how I bring people into the fold, when and if. And it sounds like the same, like, would our paths have crossed but for the fact we were both seeking him? I don't think so.
Yeah,
So yeah. Uh,
absolutely.
so you are following God, you are building the grant writing consulting, and then you have your podcast. I want to dive into your podcast for a second
Okay.
because there are so many women who are afraid to flip on the camera, turn on the recorder, write the post, create the content.
It's a lot.
It can be overwhelming. How can we bring those processes into some clarity for them today?
For me, it came down to routine.
Hmm.
And it took me a while, like it took me a while to get a routine that gave me a pleasant experience and a routine that gave my guest a pleasant experience. And that just came with bumps and bruises and falling down and okay, this is not working, and just really, really figuring it out. And that was my experience. It doesn't have to be, you know, whoever's listening, your audience, it doesn't have to be their experience. But what I would say is determine which days, and this was very important for me, determine which days you want to record, if you want to record or if you want to go live. Because I know several podcasters, they do their episodes live, which is fine. Or do you want to pre-record your podcast? Ask yourself those questions and then answer. But whatever the answer is, it needs to be something that you can maintain. So
Yes.
if you're going to go live, you need to be able to maintain that. If you're going to pre-record your podcast, your episodes, it needs to be something you can maintain. So
Yeah.
figure out which days you want to do your podcast. Figure out how long each episode will be. And these are very close-ended questions.
Hmm.
Do you want to do your podcasting every day, Monday through Friday? Do you want
Right.
to do your podcasting only on Tuesdays and Thursdays? What days? How long do you want each episode to be? 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 120 minutes? Are you going to do virtual? A lot of my podcasts are virtual because I interview people nationally and internationally. If you're going to do virtual, what platform are you going to use? Are you going to use Zoom? Are you going to use StreamYard? Are you going to use something else? So
Yeah.
a lot of closed-ended questions. What time of day are you going to record? Are you going to do 11 a.m., 12 p.m., 6 p.m.? Like, what time of day are you going to record? And this creates seamlessness for you as the host or the producer, whatever role that is. And it also creates a seamless experience for your guests because they know what to expect. They know what days you're going to record. They know what time. They know how long. They know if it's going to be live or pre-recorded. They already know all of these things going in. So if you can answer as many questions for your guests before they ask,
Yep.
then you will have a seamless customer experience on your podcast. But all of that, again, came through trial and error for me, trying to figure out what days to record, what time to record, how long should each episode be. And then something that I do, and you and I have done this, I do a podcast onboarding,
Yep.
just a quick 30 minutes. Sometimes it doesn't last that long, but 30 minutes where I speak to each podcast guest before you even get on the show.
Yep.
I give you all the information that you need. It gives you time to ask questions of me. So by the time we get to the podcast, all of your answers have been answered.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing that we were talking about off air, and thank you for that. I think that's going to touch somebody, right? Because I think sometimes it's in the things, the not knowing that stalls people out.
Yes.
But one of the things that we talked about off air was your podcast was an answered prayer, but it was also the answered prayer for someone else. And so I would love for you to talk about just how God moves when we are obedient to whatever it is He is asking of us, even in our discomfort.
Right. So thank you so much. That's such a great question. When I so I love learning and I'm normally in my car listening to podcasts or I'm reading handheld books, but I would have to go to different platforms depending on what I wanted to learn and what I wanted to listen to. And I was speaking to friends and, just people that I know, and it was a 21st century problem, Sybil. So I'm like, I get tired of, going to all these different platforms. If I want to, listen about basketball or football or politics or cooking or, whatever. So everybody was kind of in agreement with me. And I was like, dang, I should, do something about that. And so God just put it on my spirit to start interviewing people. So the vernacular podcast was not there. But he was like, start interviewing people,
Yes.
listen to people, learn from people. And I was like, imposter syndrome. Who's going to talk to me? Who's going to, you know, get on the internet and, open themselves up to the internet and people on the internet and, be emotionally open and emotionally inviting to
Yeah.
me? And so God gave me the person. His name was Joe Evans Jr., someone that I had already known for years. And I was like, Joe's not gonna speak to me, doubting, even though God is telling me to do this, do
Do
this.
this.
And
Yeah.
even in my doubting, because I want people to listen to this. Delayed obedience is disobedience.
Oh, yes.
So I was never delayed in the obedience, but I was questioning. So when God said you need to interview people, I'm like, okay, well, how am I do this? What equipment do I need? What platform do I use? Like I did not know. Then he was like, reach out to Joe, literally Joe. So I'm like, Joe's not gonna talk to me. I've been knowing him for years. We know each other, but he's not gonna get on camera and talk to me like, we talk. But I reached out to Joe And Joe responded very quickly. He was very excited. I could tell through the messaging. And he was like, yes, I would love to do it. So Joe says yes. And I still don't have equipment. I don't have a platform. I don't have nothing civil, but I have a yes, and I have a yes, and I have a God. And that's all you need. So, we did the podcast, and Joe Evans was my first guest. And people always ask me, who has been your favorite guest? And I've had amazing guests. Like every one of my guests, this is my third season. Every one of my guests have been absolutely amazing. Like I can't stress that enough. And I'm so thankful to every one of them who has gotten on my platform and been honest and spoken about their heartbreak and spoken about their successes and spoken about their failures and spoken about life and marriage and children and business and all of these things. But it started with Joe. So
Yeah.
that's why I always say, he's my favorite guest because it started with him. And then we were talking about, I was able to tell him this story that I'm telling you and your listeners, Sybil. And he was like, you know what? You were my first time that I did a podcast. So I was like, what? He was like, no one had ever asked me to speak or a talk or anything like that before you. He was like, but since that time that we spoke and I did your podcast, I have been on hundreds of podcasts, and people are always asking and inviting me to come and speak on their platform. He was like, but it started with you. And I was like, mine started with you. And Joe truly was an answered prayer for me. But it was amazing how God brought those two things together,
Yeah.
unbeknownst to me and Joe. Like we had no idea, what God was doing behind the scenes. But it has worked out great for both of us.
That is amazing. It's just when you understand the cost of the call, and it's not your cost, it's the cost to other people, right? Would
Hmm.
he have been able to reach the lives he's reaching, but for the fact
Yes.
you were willing to be in position, I think is just so huge.
Yes.
Think about when we're delaying our obedience, now there's a domino effect.
Yes.
Somebody else isn't doing what they're supposed to do because we are reluctant or we're unsure or we're doubtful or all those other storylines that we give
Right.
ourselves. Yes, absolutely. I wanted to ask one final question before we wrap up. This has just been so amazing. And because I'm a brand person,
Yes.
I want to shout out your background for just a hot second.
Oh my goodness.
Because there is no denying there are 7 different poses. Tell me the vision behind the background for the people who might not be able to see it. I'm telling you, it is her name in these beautiful block letters. She's got all the power poses. There's going to be zero mistaking that this is your brand. How did you come up with this? Yeah, I want all of it.
Okay, so the logo, the backdrop, it says the Crystal Petrie podcast. And I wanted it to be very clear, very specific, so people would automatically know who I was
Yeah,
and what I was doing. So clearly my name is there, so you know who I am. Podcasting, for the most part, people know what that is.
right.
I chose block lettering because, sometimes people get real fancy with their font and you can't even read
Yeah,
it and understand what it's saying. So the block lettering is very clear, and very visible for anyone that's looking at it or passing by it. And then I have like different, as you call them, powerful poses within my name, within Crystal Petrie podcast. And I just thought that that was amazing. I actually, Sybil, seeing this, and the name of the company escapes me. I can't even remember, but if we wasn't on this platform, I would know. But I had seen this with another company, and I want to say it was a cooking company.
mm-hmm.
Black-owned cooking company,
Okay.
and they had cooking utensils, if I'm remembering it correctly.
Okay.
They had cooking utensils within their logo. And I was like, that is amazing. I had never seen anything like that before. And it really just caught my attention. Like I was literally just kind of scanning through a website and I saw their logo and it really just it stopped me in my tracks. It caught my attention. And so I went in and did my own version of that with different power poses throughout the name because I felt like it's attention captivating, it's engaging, it draws you in, it makes you stop and stare. It makes you ask questions. So it's something that I absolutely love. And I'm very proud of it. So thank you so much for shouting it out and giving me a chance to talk about it.
Absolutely. Because of course I believe in brand and I think people sometimes they overthink the brand, but
Yeah.
ultimately you wanted it readable, you wanted it accessible, and you wanted
Yes.
it memorable. And I think one of the things I hope people just took away from that is if you're struggling with your brand, find 3 or 4 words that you know you want your brand to be
Yes.
and then go find that visible, representation of it. This is not to be overworking it, right? Because brand identity is just one part, but
Hmm.
it's also a part of your client experience. They know
Yes.
this is the version of you they are going to get when they are showing up in your podcast, so you better come correct. That's what that
Absolutely.
says.
Thank you for that.
Here's who you're talking to.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I love it. I've gotten so many compliments on it. So it's something I'm excited about. And just like you said, with brand awareness, I have it as my background whenever I'm doing virtual interviews or virtual engagements. I
Yeah,
have it on my website, on my podcast page on my website. I have it on YouTube podcast because my podcast is on YouTube podcast, and I also have it on Apple Podcast. My podcast is also there. So, I have it everywhere visually, always marketing, always putting the brand out there.
that's right. That's right. Without it stressing you out, right? Because
Yes.
marketing is a definite lift. And I know we don't have time to talk about marketing, but it can be overwhelming. But if you
Yes.
figure out how to manage the system or manage the
Hmm.
rituals or manage your resources, there are softer ways that don't take up time to
Absolutely.
still get your brand and message across. Well, I'm so excited that we had this opportunity to share together. Y'all, if you have not checked out her podcast, please tell them how they can find it, when it airs, and you're in season 3, so we got to learn more about what you're talking about.
Absolutely. So, the name of my podcast is the Crystal Petrie Podcast. You can find us on YouTube Podcast as well as Apple Podcast. You can also Google that Crystal Petrie Podcast, and it'll pull up for you. I'm in my third season, and let's see, my third season, I am talking about, of course, education, but a few specific topics are we're going to talk about when do you know it's time to get an assistant? And this is directly for us solopreneurs, us entrepreneurs. When do you know it's time to stop doing everything yourself and bring on help?
Yeah.
That'll be one of the topics that we are discussing. We are also going to talk about when and how should you discuss politics at work, which is such a hot button topic. I know, I know. So we are going to talk about that as well.
Yeah.
Let me see. I'm trying to think of some other topics just off the top of my head that we are going to be discussing. I just spoke with a lady, amazing lady. She is living with terminal breast cancer. So she educates us about advocating for yourself, with
Yes.
doctors
Yes.
because the first doctor that she went to blew her off and said, that's nothing, that's nothing. And it turned out to be terminal breast cancer. But when she went to the doctor the first time, it was not terminal, it was actually operable. So she speaks about advocating for yourself, how that looks, how that feels, because a lot of times, whenever we are in front of doctors, we just take what they say and say, okay,
Yes.
which is what she did. And, this is her result. So she educates us about speaking up for ourselves, but also learning to live with a terminal illness. And she has small children.
Oh, it, oh gosh. I could
Yes,
say so much, but we don't have time.
right.
But literally, I speak to so many women who are being medically gaslighted and who are being told that nothing's wrong with you, or you must
Absolutely.
be depressed, or you must have
Absolutely.
anxiety. And I think that if we are not careful, we will buy into these quick fix solutions instead of
Mhm.
really standing firm and saying, no, that's not me. And but we also have to be good at communicating our symptoms. And I don't think that we do a good job of that because we don't have language. So I'm really excited to tune in for that particular episode.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. This
Yes.
has been such a fabulous interview, Crystal. I might just have to have you
Thank you.
because
Oh,
it's
I would love
so
that.
amazing. Y'all, this has been another episode of Sybil After Six. Stay tuned for more amazing, phenomenal women in business like Crystal. Crystal, thank you so much for joining me today. Oh,
Thank you.
gosh.